Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit then conquered all parts of the earthly planet, Bhadrashva, Ketumala, Bharata, the northern Kuru, Kimpurush, etc., and exacted tributes from their respective rulers. Purport. Bhadrashva, it is a tract of land near Meru Parvat, and it extends from Gandhamadana Parvat to the saltwater ocean. There is a description of this Varsha in the Mahabharata, Bhishma Parva. The description was narrated by Sanjay to Dhritarashtra. Maharaj Yudhishthira also conquered this Varsha, and thus the province was included within the jurisdiction of his empire. Maharaj Parikshit was formally declared to be the emperor of all lands ruled by his grandfather, but still he had to establish his supremacy while he was out of his capital to exact tribute from such states. Ketumala. This earth planet is divided into 7 dreeps by 7 oceans, and the central dreep called Jambudreep is divided into 9 varshas or parts by 8 huge mountains. Bharata Varsha is one of the above mentioned 9 varshas, and Ketumala is also described as one of the above varshas. It is said that in Ketumala Varsha, women are the most beautiful. This Varsha was conquered by Arjuna also. A description of this part of the world is available in the Mahabharata. Sabhaparva. It is said that this part of the world is situated on the western side of the Meru Parvat, and inhabitants of this province used to live up to 10,000 years, stated in Bhishma Parva. Human beings living in this part of the globe are of golden color, and the women resemble the angels of heaven. The inhabitants are free from all kinds of diseases and grief. Bharata Varsha. This part of the world is also one of the 9 varshas of the Jambudreep. The description of Bharata Varsha is given in the Mahabharata, Bhishma Parva, chapters 9 and 10. In the center of Jambudreep is Ilavita Varsha, and south of Ilavita Varsha is Hari Varsha. The description of these varshas is given in the Mahabharata Sabha Parva as follows. Nagarangcha Banamschaivat Nadischa Demalodakaha Purushan Devakalpamscha Narishcha Priyadarshanaha Adrishta Purvan Subhaghan Sadadarsha Dhananjayaha Sadanani Cha Shubhrani Narishcha Saram Nibhaha. It is mentioned here that the women in both these varshas are very beautiful, and some of them are equal to the Apsaras, or heavenly women. That's the summary of those 2 verses. Uttarakuru, according to Vedic geography, the northernmost portion of Jambudreep is called Uttarakuru Varsha. It is surrounded by the saltwater ocean from 3 sides and divided by Shringavan mountain from the Hiranmai Varsha. Kimpurush Varsha. It is stated to be situated north of the great Himalaya mountain, which is 80,000 miles in length and height, and which covers 16,000 miles in width. These parts of the world were also conquered by Arjuna, Sabha, that's mentioned. The Kimpurushas are descendants of a daughter of Daksha. When Maharaj Yudhishthira performed the horse sacrifice yajna, the inhabitants of these countries were also present to take part in the festival, and they paid tributes to the emperor. This part of the world is called Kimpurush Varsha, or sometimes the Himalayan provinces, Himavati. It is said that Shukadeva Goswami was born in these Himalayan provinces, and that he came to Bharata Varsha after crossing the Himalayan countries. In other words, Maharaj Parikshit conquered all the world. He conquered all the continents, and joining all the seas and oceans in all directions, namely the eastern, western, northern, and southern parts of the world. It might have been thought that after that whole great battle of Kurukshetra, that the world would just be under the control of the kings. Well, it already was, even before that the world was under the control of the kings at what's presently known as Delhi, Hastinapur. But we see that just a generation later, of course, Parikshit Maharaj was the grandson of Arjuna, but practically he was the next king after Yudhishthira. So in the next generation already, he has to go out and personally show his might to keep control. Alexander the Great was famous for going and conquering a country, then he'd march on to the next one, and in the meantime, the country that he'd conquered, the old kings would come back and they'd just carry on life as usual. So what was the point of him conquering it in the first place? It's just marching on, and what he conquered is left behind, and it's no longer under his control. Prabhupada said like that, don't make me like Alexander the Conqueror, that I preached all over the world, and then when I leave there's nothing left. You have to maintain. Prabhupada said that if you can't expand it, at least maintain it, and at least maintain what we've developed. And at that time we thought, well, that's easy, because everything seemed easy when Prabhupada was here, and we thought, well, just maintain it, it's no problem. But then we find it's not so easy. It seemed easy. By Prabhupada's grace, the movement has expanded. Actually, a lot more since Prabhupada left. But in some places, it's not going on as well as it was previously, in many ways. So Maharaj Parikshit is going out to subdue the world. These kings are more or less under his control, but the nature of Kshatriyas is that they don't easily submit to others. It's considered humiliating unless one king is significantly, very clearly more powerful than another. To submit to him is humiliating. This Jayadratha, he was, for a punishment for his trying to take away Draupadi, was forced to go to all the kings of the world and tell them, I am a slave of Yudhishthira. So that's a punishment. For a devotee to say, I am a slave of my Guru, and then he identifies himself, Hari Guru Vaishnav Das. But a Kshatriya never wants to be servant of anyone except the Supreme Lord and the Brahmanas. But to other Kshatriyas, they don't like to submit. So Maharaj Parikshit is going out all over the world, and the description of different parts of the world is given here. Prabhupada in the purport speaks of Vedic geography. Now, if you're going to say geography, why should there be Vedic geography? Because geography means that one part of the world is here, another part is there, and it's geography. Vedic geography should be the same as any other geography. It's not that, well, in my opinion, China is south of Sri Lanka, so that's Bhakti Vikasa Swami's geography. So, but just by wishing it or saying it, China doesn't become south of Sri Lanka. It's north, just in case you didn't know. More or less to the north of Sri Lanka. So, these descriptions, it's difficult to match them with the geographical knowledge of the world as we have it now. We don't, where is Mount Meru? There may be different opinions about that. In Sanskrit, Meru means the North Pole, isn't it? At least in Bengali, in the dictionary, it says like that.
That's one interpretation.
That's one interpretation, yeah. That came in the dictionary. Yeah.
Because in the description of Mount Meru, it's shaped like this.
It's upside down, kind of, yeah.
It's like cross pulleys there.
Yeah. Mount Meru is broad on the top and narrow at the bottom. And you don't see. Yeah, it's any mountain means you say a mountain peak because it's broad at the bottom and becomes less wide at the top. But Meru is round the other way, according to the description in Shastra. So, what's going on? Is it all the Vedic geography? Is it just some kind of imagined thing and Parikshit Maharaj didn't really go out? Or how can we try and put it all together that Sadaput has been trying to do that for the last 25 or 30 years? And others also. Not only Vedic geography, but cosmology. Prabhupada gave some insights. He said that the Yakshas are from Tibet. whatever that means. The Yakshas means the gunners, or the associates of Kuvera. So maybe there's a lot of money up in Tibet. We don't know. It's pretty difficult to go there. The Chinese have conquered it over, and they're doing a genocide up there. The Kimpurushas.
They're up north of the Himalayas.
North of the Himalayas. And in here the Himalayas are mentioned as being, 60,000 miles long? 80,000 miles. And how many miles high? Something like 80,000 miles in length and height. And 16,000 miles in width. And 16,000 miles, that's like most of the Earth planet as we know it now. So it's difficult to understand. One time Prabhupada was flying over the Alps, which are mountains in Europe. And if you've seen the Himalayas, they don't look very big. But in Europe, they're big mountains. And he said that he commented that these mountains, they go up to the next Varsha. But you can only see them. They go up and then they stop and the plane flies over. So what that means, no one thought to ask Prabhupada at the time. It was reported in Bhakti-Godhead. Satsuru Maharaj, who was traveling with him, gave this comment that these mountains, they go up to the next Varsha. That means that there's something Prabhupada saw which we don't see in these mountains. Another time he was referring to the Andes in South America. He was saying that there's so many mountains. If you see the map, the Andes Mountains, it covers this very long continent, much bigger than India. And the Andes, they cover a large part, a huge section of the continent from north to south is covered by the Andes Mountains. The Prophet said, I doubt if they've all been seen or explored or mapped. So there may be so many things. This Prabhupada also said that Ravana, his kingdom extension was South America, because the tunnel from Lanka, from Lanka goes to South America, and we have the story of Mahi Ravana, the brother of Lankaraj, Ravana. And apparently there is in all this mysteria, what's the word for that? Some word like that? Mysteria, that's the word. You can find in various books, which you can find in esoteric bookshops in the Western world. There are thousands of books on all different topics, like how Jesus lived in India, and crop circles, and all kinds of things. And how UFOs and so on. One of them, they mentioned that there's some tunnel in South America. You can go in, but you can't come out. Anyone who goes in, they never come out. So that's some of our devotees were thinking that this is Ravana's tunnel that goes to Lanka. Then again, what is Lanka? Because Lanka in the Ramayana is 700 miles off the coast of India. So the Sri Lanka we have now, is it to the west? It's only 30 miles from Rameshwaram. Seychelles Island, Madagascar is quite a big place. So there are so many mysterious things. One interesting thing is that we can consider rather before we throw out all credibility for the Vedic descriptions, is that according to Vedic astronomy, the whole science of astrology, which is very important in Vedic culture, is based on astronomy. And they made calculations, and they couldn't do it unless they knew the position and the movements of the planets, which means their astronomy was advanced. You get the point? Because they calculate, just like we calculate now, this comet is coming, or the time of the sunrise, moonrise, and the tithi, calculating the tithi, and so many things depend on the movements of the planets. And they were able to do so, otherwise they wouldn't. The science of astrology, and it's an important part of it's essential to Vedic civilization, which is based on performance of yajna. Vedic civilization is centered on the performance of yajna. All the endeavors of human society are channeled into yajna. And then for yajna, to find out not only for yajna, but for finding out the auspicious time for doing it, one has to calculate according to astrology, which is based on astronomy. So they had the names of different planets. Not only the names, but they could tell the movements, and they say what's on these planets. So what they say is on the planets, again, it doesn't correspond with what modern science says is on the planets. But that they can very accurately give the movements of the planets suggests that their science wasn't just that they had their cosmology or their astronomy correct, and then their cosmology or their description of the planets was just something made up. So they knew something. And actually, as followers of the Vedic Shastra, Prabhupada, he very much stressed the point that we have to accept the Vedic descriptions, even if they don't seem to fit the scientific description. And it's very difficult for people in the modern age to do that, because science, its basis is pratyaksha, which to us, pratyaksha means that which is perceivable immediately to our senses, particularly our eyes. And it seems to us to be the most, especially the way we've been raised and educated, it seems to us to be the most plausible form of evidence among all the different forms of evidence. If we can see something, it seems to make sense. Just like people say, show me God, as if that's a challenge, because they're sure that we can't. And the idea is that, well, if we could see, then we could accept, otherwise we can't accept. But of course, seeing is not all in all, because you might see God but not recognize Him. Just like if there's a whole crowd of people going, some may say, well, there's a whole, the Prime Minister comes and there's a whole group of people surrounding him, and someone says, show me the Prime Minister, you point, and you don't know which one it is. You can't, just by looking you can't say. So Krishna, he was personally present, but then people who didn't want to recognize him as God, even he showed his Vishwarup even to Duryodhana before the battle, just to show, I'm Bhagavan, but Duryodhana still didn't. He was seeing God, but he still didn't accept as God. So, seeing is not all in all. But to the materialist, this is very important. And actually to everyone, it's important. We also say, Jagannatha Swami, Nayamna Bhaktagami Bhavattume. The devotee desires to see God, and this pratyaksha, it appears from, at least the scientists tell us that what they've seen on different planets, through the, not direct pratyaksha, but through telescopes and photos sent from satellites, so we're told. I mean, they don't even say it doesn't correspond to the Vedic description. They don't care about the Vedic description. But it appears to be very different to what is stated in Shastra. And we have in Shastra a description of the sun god, which doesn't seem very likely, according to modern descriptions, how any people can live in the sun, which is so hot. But then the Vedic description says that their bodies are composed of fire, fiery bodies, just like we have bodies which are suitable for living in this atmosphere, and the inhabitants of the sun globe, they have bodies suitable for falling asleep in the sun planet. We put you in the sun planet. You like to go there? You can't imagine how you can sleep in a fiery body. If it's burning, then how can you sleep? But for them, it's quite normal and natural. They eat, they sleep, they mate and they defend, they do everything in that kind of body, according to the Vedic description. We can't see that. The moon, Prabhupada insisted, is further away than the sun, and it's a heavenly planet. It's in Bhagavad-gita, Lord Krishna says, what is that? Somo Bhutva Rasamaka. What's the line before that? What's the line before that? Oshadhi. Gama Vishata Bhutani Dhayami Aham Ojasa Pushnami Choshadhi Sarva Somo Bhutva Rasamaka. Krishna says, I become the moon and nourish the vegetables by the moonlight. So, description is given how the moon's rays are very nice for the vegetables, and the moon is a heavenly planet. But when they first went there, they said it was full of dust, and now they say there's ice there. But it doesn't correspond to the Vedic description. So it becomes a dilemma for the followers of the Vedic literature, because Vedic literature is Veda Narayana Sakshat. It's directly manifested from Narayana, who is according to the Vedic description, the creator or the original source of everything, including the mundane universe. So the Vedas are perfect. So if the Vedic descriptions of the universe are not perfect, then it calls into question or brings into doubt all the Vedic knowledge. This was the crisis that happened in the Western world. Well, an ongoing crisis over hundreds of years, beginning with Copernicus, Polish astronomer, who postulated that contrary to the Church's description, I'm not sure if it's in the Bible, but the Church was saying that Church means at that time there was only one church in the Western Europe, the Church of Rome, and they were saying that the sun goes around the earth, which according to our eyes, what we see every day seems to make sense, doesn't it? We're sitting here in Jambakam, and the sun rises in the east, and you see it traveling, and it goes and it sets in the west, and then we presume it goes down on the Bombay side somewhere, goes down into the sea, or does it? Goes into the sea, and then comes up the next. So it seems that the sun is going around the earth. It seems to make sense. But then Copernicus said, no, the earth's going around the sun. And then Galileo upheld that, and then that was the beginning of, it was the first victory of empiric science, which gradually took the position of the Church as being the main shaper of human thought in the Western world. Previously the Church had given what the Church said that was considered to be knowledge. There was no it wasn't, as in the Vedic culture, there was no separation between spiritual knowledge and secular knowledge. Just everything was, the universities were founded in the Western world for theological studies, for studying the Bible, not for studying anything else. And the other subjects which came up, they were in the beginning considered to be adjuncts to studying Latin, which was the language of the Bible and of all educated people all over Europe. And other subjects gradually came up, but nowadays it's very difficult to find any department of theology in any university. They just maintain for show in some universities, but new universities, they're founded mostly all technical subjects. You won't find, I doubt if there's any university in India that teaches theology. Theology is...
They have an separate society, philosophy.
No, that's Theosophical Society. Yeah, that's something altogether different. Being Vaishnava. But theology in the Western countries means actually biblical studies. So, theology means God is a Christian or something like that. So the science, it's usurped the position of the church, because it was found that the church, they can't give answers, and science can, to various questions, to so many things. Science is giving practical knowledge for human society, which the church has just praised. So science is considered very practical, whereas the religious knowledge is considered otherworldly. There's a word in English, otherworldly, which is a kind of, it's used as not exactly pejorative, what's a demeaning kind of term when someone's, they have a very imaginative way of thinking, not very practical. It's otherworldly, or just. So religion is considered something impractical, and science is considered something very practical. And religion is considered something which, well, if you like, you can be religious, but science is required for everyone. So science is taught in the schools and universities, and if you want, you can be religious. We have no objection, but it's not a necessity for everybody. So science has, because they appear to be able to demonstrate so many practical things, whereas the religion or the biblical descriptions, it doesn't seem to have any link to reality as we know it, and that's a fact. I mean, that's the fact, that religion doesn't have a link to, actually it does, but it is concerned with reality as we don't know it. And that's what we need to know. Because what we think is reality isn't reality. And what we need to know is the actual reality, which is beyond the mind, the scope of the mundane mind and senses. However, coming back to this point, it's still a challenge or a quandary that the descriptions in Shastra of the Earth and the different planets, they don't appear to tally with those of which modern science has given us. So how are we to understand this? Well, there are different approaches. Prabhupada was very insistent that the Shastric knowledge is perfect, and if the scientists say something different, they're wrong. And actually, unless we accept this, it's very difficult to accept any part of Shastra, because if we say that Vyasadeva is giving the highest knowledge of the absolute truth, but in between he just put in some fairy stories about different parts of the universe. All of a sudden he just became senile during the 5th canto or something, and then it doesn't seem to make sense. And there are so many descriptions in Shastra which don't seem to make any sense. We have people meditating for tens of thousands of years, and then Varaha Dev is coming out of the nostril of Brahma, who has 4 heads, and then he picks up the earth planet on his tusk. It requires faith in that which is not seen, or we don't expect to see ever in our lives any such thing, to accept such descriptions. Of course, there are many descriptions all over the world of many things which don't tally with modern science, which is one reason why there are so many bookshops and underground, not really underground movements, but subcultural movements of this, like I was saying, UFOs and crop circles and what else do they have? What else? So many different things. There's so many things. In Russia, for many years, even in the communist time, they were studying ESP, extrasensory perception, whereas in Western Europe and America, that was considered beyond the pale of respectable science. But in Russia, they were ultimately for military purposes, I suppose. They were studying spying and all that. Extrasensory perception means reading other people's minds, and then within that there come so many other subjects also. How you can influence people just by thought, just by the power of thinking. You can influence someone else's thoughts. Or when I was a kid, I didn't see myself, but so many of my friends at school told me that on TV there was someone who someone would hold a spoon, and just by looking at it he would make it bend in the middle, just by his mental concentration. And there's so many things like that. You probably have people in India also doing like that. So there are many phenomena which don't come within the purview of modern science. They don't fit. Modern science is not able to describe it, which suggests that there are other energies at work within the universe beyond those which we can measure. Science means to measure. Maya also means to measure. Mapiyate anaya iti maya. One definition of Maya is the attempt to measure everything. We think we can measure everything, but Krishna is immeasurable. So the attempt to measure him, or even to measure this material world and think we can know everything about it, that is one prominent symptom of Maya. And still we didn't get to the point, well, how are these descriptions? They don't fit with what we can see. Well, one way of saying is, Prabhupada, he says that the scientists must be wrong. But then how can we say wrong? You can see Himalayas, at least to some extent. You can fly, and all the geographers in the world, cartographers in the world agree that it's like this. So you can see this. Sadhaputta Prabhu's books, he's offered some explanation that there are dimensions that we cannot see. The geography, he has suggested that the geography in the Bhagavatam is to a large extent that as seen by the demigod, who may see things that we don't see. Just like I was saying, Prabhupada is saying these mountains, they go up to the next varsha, that in some subtle level, the mountains, they continue, they're higher than we think. There are also some interesting things that both at the North Pole and the South Pole there are records of explorers who are going, and they all of a sudden, they were going over the ice, they found them in what they described what we would call a heavenly planet. That they go, all of a sudden they're going along on the ice, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in some place which is beautiful climate and beautiful people, and so that description has been given. But how other people describe is that because of the subjection to severe cold for such a long time, then they started hallucinating. That's how the scientists describe it, because it's difficult to imagine how at the North Pole you can suddenly be in some heavenly situation. But that suggestion is there that Meru fits with the North Pole, and then the South Pole is called, what's that? something opposite of Meru or something. Dakshin Meru or something like that. I can't remember what this means. So there are so many things. Prabhupada wanted all these things. I'm not giving any solution here. I don't have a solution. But Prabhupada wanted all these things to be researched. There should be research. How we can show to the satisfaction of modern scientists or modern scientifically minded people that the Vedic knowledge is perfect in all respects. In the meantime, we can just accept that it is and chant Hare Krishna and get the result of the Vedic knowledge. That's my suggestion. We can read about Maharaj Parikshit. There are so many points. Prabhupada said that the Europeans, they're all from Kshatriya stock. Fallen Kshatriyas, driven out by Parashuram. And then we find there are vestiges of Vedic culture all over the world. There are deities, Vedic deities found in different places all over the world. In Russia and South America. Indonesia, we might expect that's quite close to India. That was Hindu until a few hundred years ago. Yeah, it was all, their language is still based on Sanskrit. So Indonesia was part of the Vedic culture. It was under
they were sending kings and princes to the other countries. Now they're sending software.
Yeah. India has to rediscover her own glory. They're discovering India's glory. Maharaj, any comments? How would you have taken this class?
I suppose that the main controversy would be
You want to put this here, what Maharaj is
where
saying?
Scripture describes the things which are material and spiritual. Separate the two things and describe all spiritual things, then we can just say, okay, spiritual, and we can't access it with the normal senses. But where the Scriptures do describe so-called material things like geography, etc., or people or races or whatever, on this particular planet, which we should be able to see, and it completely contradicts, then there's a problem. So that's the problem, of course, with Christianity when they adopted Aristotle's viewpoints, and we say that the sun is going around the earth and all this stuff, and then when it's proved wrong or contrary to
then the whole
thing, then you want to reject everything and say it's fallible. So then we have the same problem, but our thing was not adopted from anywhere because we have right in the Bhagavad-gita and other Vedic things, we have all these things closely connected with materialism stated. So you can't separate them like you could ultimately separate the Christian from the Aristotelian, whatever, if you wanted to,
It's difficult to separate when you have Krishna started off in Dwarka and then going through the coverings of the universe to Mahavishnu Loka. And there are so many things. And then he drives his horses overnight to, where is it? He's chasing this Samantakajur, Shatrajit, and overnight he goes all the way to Kashi, which even a modern train, of course if it was a Western train it could probably do that.
Anyway, it goes through the mind. But there's other things which are like contrary. Let's say, okay, we say if we're going to maintain that the Earth actually is the center of the universe and the sun goes around it, as is in the Bhagavatam also, and we say, well, the scientists are lying to us.
The Earth is the center, but it's on the central point.
Yeah, with Mount Meru in the middle and then the planets going around it.
In fact, it's not that the Earth is actually
not in the center. Yeah.
But it's within the central area.
And then all the other planets are revolving around it.
Yeah.
So if we take that sort of theory and say, okay, the scientists are lying to us, and actually, with this whole thing with the solar system is wrong, then you look a little ridiculous.
According to relativity theory, you can hold your hand like that, but according to relativity theory, the whole of the universe is
So that's the other idea. to just speak of it in different perceptions, that's all.
Yeah.
But to outright deny that science is completely wrong and they're all blind or they're all ignorant, that's also kind of a stupid thing to say. Yeah.
Are they simultaneously blocking all the different sciences in the world?
Yeah.
Although we do find that it seems by the power of Maya that they all together consider one thing to be right, and then later on they all find out that it's all wrong. And that's how they interpret their data, what they see. They're also not very sure about what's going on, although there are some of them that they're pretty much all agreed on. But some things, to me as a layman, they just seem bizarre. I mean, it's like these black holes in space, it's all just, it's required to fit their mathematical calculations. But to me it just seems like just some bizarre imagination. This mass, tremendous mass at some point, anything that goes in just gets absorbed into it. And they have so many theories about some of the stuff, Nobel Prize for this invisible matter, which has been imagined. Otherwise they can't explain how there's so much gravity. So they say that the universe is so much invisible matter which you can't see and you can't perceive it. But it must be there, otherwise our gravitational calculations don't fit. So
Which means other worlds are there.
again, it is true that there are other worlds, and they're just mass, just unseen. But that's orthodox scientific theory. It's Nobel Prize winning theory. This postulation that half the matter of the universe is you can't see it or can't perceive it, it's just there.
But we also believe that because actually all we can see now is a combination of the elements in certain portions, and we can't see the pure elements which also exist in the universe. So we have false ego and Mahatattva and all the senses, that's objects.
That on a higher planet, people have subtle bodies which they're composed of subtle matter which we're not able to perceive.
Yeah.
But that kind of matter wouldn't have the gravitational pull, which is called false ego.
Well, no, but the matter itself, like water, air, in different proportions that we can't see, would be there also. And it would be matter also.
Yeah.
Like we say, the Devas have water bodies, predominantly water, and we got earthy bodies, so therefore, we can't see them because our vision is tuned to a different frequency.
There's lots of work to do. Prabhupada very much wanted it. He was very enthusiastic about Bhakti-Vedanta Institute. He was ready to give them any amount of money to do their research and hold conferences and show that Vedic science is correct. He's in a challenging mood. Not that we have to make some compromise with one another to show that it's wrong. Of course, the most important thing he wanted to show is that the soul is the principle of life. That life does not come from matter. So lots of work to do. Prabhupada said it's not simply a sentimental religious movement. We have to show scientifically the veracity of the Vedic knowledge. So, anyone want to go out? Get your PhD in spiritual studies, spiritual science. It's coming now. It's coming up. It's at least one area. Prabhupada is very strong against Darwinism. So that in the Western world it's become very strong movement for full, intelligent design. The universe, well, it's interrelated. The universe hasn't come into being by chance, it must have been designed, which means there's God. So it's becoming a strong movement.